Good afternoon to you. 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Margot Cleveland joins us from the Federalist at 4:30. We'll talk to her about the ongoing attacks by the American left on Supreme Court Justice Sam Alito and his family. Disgraceful stuff. Margot will react to that. And then Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears is here at 5:30. Joe Biden tells a very dangerous series of lies at Morehouse College's commencement. The lieutenant governor would like to react to those statements coming up. That's at 5:30. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We'll return to the breaking news out of New York, the testimony now of a man called Robert Costello on the stand, who's got a lot of thoughts on Michael Cohen. He was a former legal advisor to Michael Cohen, and he's revealing now to the jury that Cohen is, well, a liar. A liar. But the one of the big news items internationally this weekend was the death of Iran's president, Ebrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash, they say. And for those of us here in the United States who would like to know what the hell this all means for the rest of us, I want to bring in Gabriel Noronha now, Executive Director of Polaris National Security and a former State Department advisor on Iran. Gabriel, good to have you back with us.
Hey, good to be here as always.
So immediately I realized, well, the president of Iran is not really the head honcho, but this does have impact, doesn't it?
It does. He's in charge of all domestic affairs, so sort of the economy, domestic cabinets. But he's also still a top foreign policy official. He doesn't call the shots, but he's doing negotiations. But, the thing that's most important here is that this actually paves the way for us to know with pretty good certainty who the next supreme leader of Iran will be. Raisi was in contention along with the son of the current supreme leader, that's Moshtaba Khamenei. So now with Raisi dead, it looks like the supreme leader's son will take over and be the new supreme leader when he dies. That tells us a little bit of something. I don't think we're going to see major changes in policy, but it's still pretty evident that that's the succession plan today.
Is there any reason to predict foul play based on that? If basically if there were only two people in contention to become the next supreme leader, and the son is still alive and his opponent is dead, is there any reason to believe that that was an intentional thing?
I don't believe so. Look, the helicopter went down in an extremely foggy area. The pilot was flying somewhere he shouldn't have been flying. And the fact that it took the regime 16 hours to find the helicopter tells you just how treacherous the terrain was. Yeah. Now, he was also really close to the supreme leader. He was an insider. So, no, I don't suspect foul play here.
All right. So he's dead now. I saw today that the Biden administration has expressed all sorts of condolences to Iran. The State Department releasing a statement today from Matthew Miller saying, the United States expresses its official condolences for the death of Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, Foreign Minister Amir Abdollahian, and other members of their delegation in a helicopter crash in northwest Iran. As Iran selects a new president, we reaffirm our support for the Iranian people and their struggle for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Is this standard fare? Is this normal for the Biden administration, the federal government, to issue statements of condolence for such a large purveyor of global terrorism?
It's really surprising to me to see something that egregious. Look, here's what Americans should know about Raisi. In the 1980s, he was one of the lead executioners for political prisoners. He sentenced over 5,000 religious minorities and political prisoners to their deaths. When he was the Chief Justice of Iran, he was responsible for carrying out death sentences against dozens of teenagers, helping support the regime kill 1,500 political protesters in 2019. This is a man whose hands are soaked in blood. He's been claimed of having raped and tortured a woman in a torture chamber back in the 80s as well. This is someone we should be celebrating their demise, not sending our official condolences. I think there is a lack of moral clarity here. And guess what? The family's not going to be interested in in the United States condolences anyway, so it's not going to do any good.
But this is consistent with the Biden administration's posture towards Iran. They've had so many people who are very either pro-Iran within the ranks, working specifically at the United States Department of State, and they've worked to Iran's advantage at the expense of the entire region endlessly. So this is kind of consistent with the way Biden has treated Iran.
You know, it reminds me a lot of what President Obama did with his hope that you could empower moderates, and if you showed enough goodwill and friendliness that they would just change their behavior and stop chanting death to America. We know that gambit completely failed. The regime's ideology is to seek the destruction of the West. And so it's strange. It's almost like it's a throwback to an earlier ideology that's been completely misproven, to see this kind of language again. It's a little disturbing to me, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. Now, okay, so as you mentioned before that this does not bode much in terms of ideological change for Iran. So Ebrahim Raisi's death, do you predict that it will be in any way destabilizing beyond what we're already seeing in the Middle East? Or is this just going to be kind of a footnote to everything else that's happening?
Probably more of a footnote. I think what we're going to see is in the next 40 days, we're seeing a presidential election in Iran to replace him. And so you're going to see a lot of your political players focus more inward. They're going to do a little less plotting against Israel, and they're doing a little bit more plotting against their domestic enemies. That's good for us. But at the end of the day, whoever replaces Raisi is going to be probably just about as radical as him. You're not going to see changes in policy. But I think you'll see hopefully more infighting, more finger pointing internally, and a recognition that they don't have the most competent rescue services in the country.
There's a view here in the United States that the that the Iranian people are all broadly mourning the death of Raisi. They're mourning the death of the president of that country. In fact, that was the sentiment that was expressed today by the Senate chaplain. His name's Admiral Barry Black, and he gave these remarks during his opening prayer today. Take a listen to this.
And Lord, we pray for the Iranian people who mourn the death of their president. We pray in your loving name. Amen.
Now, is that sentiment correct? Are the Iranian people broadly mourning the death of the president today, do you think?
Well, look, in every dictatorship, there are people who are forced to the streets to do things like this, and Iran is no exception there. But, you know, if you have Iranians who go out and celebrate, they're shot or they're imprisoned. And despite that, we've seen fireworks set off in Tehran and other cities. Iranians outside Iran are celebrating at the embassies of Iran and across Europe and the United States even. And so, yes, there are some people who are mourning, but you would see an overwhelming majority of people celebrating really the demise of their persecutor if they were free to do so without repercussion.
Yeah, no, you do see it. You see it in Iranians in the United States who hold the ruling regime in utter contempt in Iran, and they can do that here freely, of course, without fear of the Iranians hurting them. But that seems to be a broad sentiment.
It is. And so, you know, I used to work in the Senate. I like Barry Black, the chaplain, but he probably doesn't know what he's talking about. If you listen to actually Senator McConnell, he had it right. He said he's thinking about the people of Iran who have suffered under Ebrahim Raisi and his clutch of power for decades. That's where we should be thinking of. We should be thinking of the women who get beat up and tortured and imprisoned for showing their hair in public. We should be thinking of the Iranians whose relatives have been hung by their neck for practicing the wrong religion. That's who we should be thinking about today, not Ebrahim Raisi's family or his supporters.
Well, Gabriel Noronha, as always, Executive Director of Polaris National Security, former State Department official on Iran under President Trump. Thank you for your analysis on this. A lot of headlines on it this weekend, and I thought, all right, what to make of it? We'll go to Gabriel, and I'm glad we did. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks for having me.
That's, again, Gabriel Noronha. Yeah, the Biden administration issuing all these words of support for the Iranian regime today, issuing condolences. We're so sorry about losing the guy. Meanwhile, you know, Biden has worked to really empower Iran, given them access to tens of billions of dollars, which they've again, turned around and used to perpetuate acts of terror throughout the Middle East, and very specifically on Israel on October 7th. And now Israel trying to fight back, and the Biden administration practically doing Iran's bidding here and stymieing Israel from doing that, fighting back against Hamas. So it's this whole thing is very tortured, very tortured. And once again today, Biden administration kind of tipping its hand, showing where their true loyalties lie. And that's gross. It's just super disgusting. And we've still never really gotten to the bottom of what's going on with the Iranian moles inside of the Biden administration. In fact, the National Review had a piece up just a week ago, headlined, "Biden's compromised Iran envoy deserves more congressional investigation." They say a long overdue reckoning over the conduct of Rob Malley, President Biden's Iran envoy, might be on the way, however much the administration endeavors to bury the truth. The Washington Post reported last week that members of Congress believe that Malley emailed classified documents to a personal email address and then downloaded them to his personal phone from there. Those lawmakers had done their own freelance investigative work to reach that conclusion because the State Department has been outrageously tight-lipped about the situation. After Malley failed to show up at a congressional briefing last April, officials told members of Congress that he was merely on leave rather than suspended pending the results of an investigation. Congress learned the truth through the press. The State Department appears not to just have failed to inform lawmakers about the situation, but to have actively misled them. Throughout all of this, State has handled Malley's case with velvet gloves. Amid his suspension and ongoing probes into his conduct, he was granted permission to teach classes at both Yale and Princeton. Now the FBI is involved, according to Politico. The Bureau is looking into whether Malley committed any crimes related to his reported transfer of classified information. Even if Malley didn't conduct direct talks with Tehran via his own personal network, which seems possible, exposing classified documents to potential hacking operations is appalling enough. Last year, the Tehran Times, the Iranian regime newspaper, published a letter from the State Department's Inspector General to Malley outlining the suspension of his security clearance. Remember this when this happened? And I mentioned this on the air. How the heck did the Tehran Times get the scoop on that? How did the Tehran Times, of all places, get access to a letter from the State Department IG to Rob Malley? At the time, members of Congress were furious that they learned about such a serious matter from Iranian state media, and the latest reporting appears to confirm the genuineness of the letter. The National Review's editors say that Malley should have never been in the vicinity of Foggy Bottom in the first place, and certainly not overseeing U.S. policy towards the Iranian terror state, that is, in the years leading up to the October 7th. Okay, happening right now in that New York City courtroom, Robert Costello, former legal advisor to Michael Cohen, he's there on behalf of Trump's attorneys. They've called him as a witness. And remember, he testified last week before Congress, so we have some audio of the types of things that he might be saying right now in that courtroom. The problem that we're running into, the prosecution keeps raising objections to everything coming out of Costello's mouth about Michael Cohen, and the judge is sustaining their objections. And it's led to the point where Costello is now muttering constantly under his breath about how awful this judge is being. The judge dismissing the jury, then scolding Costello. First, let me just add, where the heck are the cameras? Why can't we see all of this and listen to it? But instead, we have to rely on the text assessments coming out of places like the New York Times for what's happening inside of that courtroom. But here's what Robert Costello knows about Michael Cohen, what he told Congress last week.
And on the next page, into that first paragraph, Cohen decided that while he didn't believe the allegation of the Stormy Daniels story, that he thought the story would be embarrassing for Trump and especially for Melania, so he decided he would take care of it himself.
Absolutely, and that is contrary to what this guy testified to in court in New York yesterday.
Well, and what's not being talked about is your next paragraph, like the reason and his motivation for that. So if you could just kind of walk through that for the committee.
Yeah, obviously, when we started to talk about the NDAs, and this is the very first meeting at the Regency Hotel, when, by the way, Rudy Giuliani was not involved in representing Donald Trump at that time. Cohen testified that it was a conspiracy between Giuliani and Costello as of this date. Totally false. In any event, He also said that he didn't discuss the Stormy Daniels matter with us, and he certainly did. I specifically asked him, because he kept on going back saying, I can't believe they're trying to put me in jail for these NDAs. So I said, Michael, tell me about the NDA. Tell me about Stormy Daniels. What did you do? He said, I got a call from a lawyer representing Stormy Daniels who represented that she was going to testify that Donald Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen said, I didn't believe the allegation, but I knew that such an allegation would be terribly embarrassing. He said it would be embarrassing. He focused on Melania Trump. He said, I didn't want to embarrass Melania Trump. He said, that's why I decided to take care of this on my own. Right. I went back to that several times. You did this on your own? On my own. Did Donald Trump have anything to do with it? No. Did you get the money from Donald Trump? No. From any of his organizations? No. From anybody connected to Donald Trump? No. Where did you get the money? I took out a HELOC loan against my property. I said, why would you do that? He said, I didn't want anybody to know where I got this money. I didn't want Melania to know. I didn't want my own wife to know because she's in charge, he said, of the Cohen family finances. He said, if she saw money coming out of my account, she'd ask me 100 questions, and I didn't want to answer any of them. It was clear after talking to him for several days after that, whenever we talked on the phone or in my office, that he kept on bringing up the subject that he felt he was betrayed by not being brought down to Washington, D.C. This guy thought, he said to me, that he should have been Attorney General of the United States, or at least the chief assistant to the president. Ludicrous.
In other words, he's got an axe to grind. And as Robert Costello testified in front of Congress, he was asked by Matt Gaetz, is Michael Cohen a liar? Costello responded, that doesn't even begin to describe him. He lies at every opportunity that's at his favor. And so that's what Costello is trying to testify to today in the courtroom. But the judge has been running interference. The judge stopping the proceedings, telling the jury to leave the room, telling the press, in fact, to leave the room. They were escorted out of the room so that he could scold Costello without a public record being built. And this is just one of the very first defense witnesses not even allowed to get the words out of his mouth as a Biden donor runs interference for an election rigging scheme. It's as dirty as you thought. Coming up, Margot Cleveland will talk to us. There's another dirty effort afoot by the left. They're trying to destroy the United States Supreme Court, this time targeting Justice Sam Alito and his family. Hey there, good afternoon to you. It is now 4:35, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up at 5:30, the Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Winsome Sears, is here. We'll talk to her about Joe Biden's disgraceful racist lies at Morehouse College this weekend. Lieutenant Governor Sears would like to discuss, so we will. That's ahead. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The left is constantly trying to destroy institutions that they do not control. And a favorite target of theirs is the United States Supreme Court. They are routinely shifting their eye of Sauron towards the next justice that they think they can destroy. Justice Clarence Thomas is typically the man they focus on. But this past week, Justice Sam Alito became the target of the moment. They say his wife has political views that he needs to get control of, or else. And he's got to recuse himself from every election case, they claim. For more on this, I want to bring in the fabulous Margot Cleveland. She's a senior legal correspondent at the Federalist, and she's written on this subject this week. Margot, good to have you back with us.
Oh, thanks so much, Vince.
So this all emanates out of a New York Times piece last week where they claim that the justice's wife back in 2021 flew an American flag upside down after she was being absolutely trashed by her neighbors, just treated in the worst possible way that you could treat a woman. And so she started flying an American flag upside down outside the house. Now the left is saying, well, that means he needs to recuse himself from all election-related cases. What's going on here, Margot?
Well, you forgot the spin that they did. That wasn't that she flew a flag upside down. It was she flew a symbol of stop the steal. And if you read a little further, it was an American flag upside down. So the short answer of what's going on here is the left is crazy. They can't deal with not being in control of everything. So they are trying to make a scandal out of nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. And as you noted, I wrote a piece up on this today that's at the Federalist, and I break it down and go through it very methodically. And let me just start with a little bit of a backdrop. I was a career law clerk for a federal appellate judge for almost 25 years, and during that time, he served on the Judicial Codes of Conduct Committee. That committee has as its charge to provide advisory opinions for judges. So if a judge has a question of, can my wife post a political sign in the yard, the judge will ask the committee what the answer is under these ethical rules. And I assisted with my judge for over 6 years doing that. So I'm extremely well-versed in what the ethics code says and what it doesn't say. So with that backdrop, the first problem with this whole story is there was no stop the steal signal. There was no symbol. There was no sign. There was an American flag upside down. And the entire idea that Justice Alito has to recuse is premised on there being a stop the steal sign, which there wasn't. It wasn't a symbol of it. And, the liberals like to rewrite history. So I went and looked at what they did back then. Yeah. Go ahead, Vince.
No, I have one question, though, because I almost feel like we could stretch this even further. So what if it was a stop the steal symbol?
Right. So that's what I did. That was my second point of, let's assume that it was a stop the steal sign. But the point on the first one, though, it's really kind of significant that they're having to make up something to make up something.
Yeah.
So they can't even attack him on reality. They have to create this false narrative that it was a symbol of stop the steal, which it wasn't. And if you go back, CNN at the time had done an article something like the secret symbols of the stop the steal movement. And there was no mention of an upside down flag.
Yeah.
But like you said, even if it was, so what? And that's exactly the answer. The Codes of Conduct Committee tells a judge what he can do and what he can't do. And one of the things a judge can't do is control his spouse. That is not what the Codes of Conduct Committee require. And it's actually right in there in the Codes of Conduct. It says a judge shall not engage in political activity. And then it makes clear in commentaries and advisory opinions and the compendium, which is kind of what in-house the judges have to look at, that this does not apply to your spouse. What you as a judge should do is to ask them not to do it and disassociate from it. And that's exactly what we saw with this scenario. When news broke, what did Justice Alito say? I had nothing to do with the flag. And it was pretty funny because what did you get the left-wingers doing? Oh, he's blaming it on his wife. It's like, no, he is doing exactly what the Codes of Conduct require.
Yeah.
He is disassociating himself from what statement his wife made.
Well, additionally, the left is demanding misogyny on his part, that he has to get control of his wife. He has to shut down her speech. She's not allowed to express herself in the way she chooses. So that the left's position here is that he needs to run every word that comes out of her mouth.
Right. It's absolutely ridiculous, hypocritical, and everything in between.
Yeah.
But so there's actually three flaws with this, this ridiculous attack on Justice Alito. The first one is there was no stop the steal symbol. Second is, even if there was, he didn't do anything wrong. It was his wife. But the third part is whether he recuses is determined by an unbiased, reasonable person who knows all of the circumstances. So right there, unbiased and reasonable, you can throw out all the leftists. They're neither of those. But we now know what the circumstances were. This had to do with a neighbor who had a profane sign in his yard. Mrs. Alito made a comment to him saying, look, you're by some school. Well, you shouldn't be putting that out there for the kids. There's an exchange between her and the neighbor in which he uses the C word. Yeah. And then Mrs. Alito hangs a flag upside down. That's it. So there is no bias, no appearance of bias if you are a reasonable person.
No. Now another piece here is, regardless of what position you hang the American flag, the left has kind of a long time ago, they just decided that it's not their thing. They think the American flag is a Republican symbol anyway. So if she was flying it correctly, they would say it's a Republican symbol. In fact, YouGov did a survey on this back in 2022. Among Republicans, 83% of them have a very positive view of the American flag. Among Democrats, just 49% have a very positive view. A minority of Democrats have a positive view. And there have been articles through the years in places like the New Yorker, the Harvard Political Review, declaring that the American flag is just a symbol for Republicans now. It's not a symbol for the country. So this whole idea that, she was flying it upside down. What do you care? You think the American flag itself is a Republican symbol. That's how ridiculous this has become.
Absolutely. And, that just means that the next scandal is going to be that they're flying the flag the right side up because it's a symbol of
MAGA.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Right. The bad guy. But it's ridiculous. And I don't know if you saw the latest supposed pile-on that apparently Justice Alito divested from an investment in the owner of Bud Light. I'm blanking on
AB InBev it's called now, but a derivative of Anheuser-Busch.
And this was going on, I guess, during the boycott because they were marketing it with what's his name, and I'm thinking, okay, wait, I'm totally lost in what your theory of a scandal is. That right-wingers had a boycott and made Justice Alito lose money? I mean, it's just so nonsensical. I can't understand it.
So that in that particular case, I saw there's a writer called Jay Caruso tweeted a summary of it today and pointed out that the stock he sold, he bought the stock in March of 2022. He sold it in August of 2023 at a loss. He lost money on the stock. So that's not... It's not like some sort of insider trading scandal where he's making money. He's losing money. And then he purchased Molson Coors right after that. Now, one would assume that that's a tax avoidance strategy, if he had to guess, because you probably, he's trying to, write off some of his losses and then buy kind of a similar stock and hope that he can make money again in the future. But none of this is a scandal. This is literally within the confines of the law.
Right, and he's disclosing it, which he's supposed to do, but that's what I'm saying. They pick a justice's name, and then they're trying to come up with something that's a scandal. But with the codes of conduct, it really is so ridiculous because the media knows the public doesn't know the ins and outs. So they can try to create a scandal out of nothing. And what the New York Times did was absolutely appalling. They quoted supposed ethics experts, and one of which said this is no different than flying or posting a Stop the Steal flag, and then said this should not be done. It doesn't matter if it's him or his wife. I reached out for a comment because that's absolutely wrong. It's 100% wrong under the Judicial Codes of Conduct. And yet the New York Times is posting this nonsense and trying to create this fury that's going to get, I don't know what they think. Justice Alito is not going to recuse. All this is doing is creating dissension and causing people to have less respect for the Supreme Court.
And these rules don't apply to the left in any way. So if you have a left-wing Supreme Court justice whose spouse has a My Body, My Choice sign posted in their front yard advocating for abortion, that left-wing justice is not recusing from the Dobbs case. That's not happening. That's crazy. And by and large, nobody would actually expect that to happen.
Right.
The left is creating new scandals in order to scandalize things that are innocuous.
Absolutely. And you saw Justice Ginsburg at times cross the ethical line where she's had to apologize for things that she has said. And yet there's none of these kind of calls that are out there. But in this case, there was nothing that was needed to be apologized for, at least not by the Alitos. The neighbor, yeah, but not the Alitos.
Yeah, I'd love to know the backstory beyond. I mean, like the Alitos are out walking, and then the neighbor straight up calls Justice Alito's wife the C word to her face, apparently, and he's standing. There's got to be more to that story, because I can't imagine any husband just stomaching that happening in front of him.
Well, I'm sure that Justice Alito knows that he's under the spotlight, and he knows what kind of man this is. So he probably
slashed his tires in the middle of the night. I understand. That makes sense.
Right there. So I just, if you think of what the D.C. group is, though, there's probably very few of the conservatives in the area, so they're stuck in that type of neighborhood. Yeah. Sounds like protests go on there all the time, just as what you saw was going on with Brett Kavanaugh in his house and with Justice Amy Coney Barrett. It's ridiculous that this happens and that this is considered appropriate.
One last thing, because you just made me think
Sure.
of it. Last week, Joe Scarborough raised this theory. He has a conspiracy theory. He thinks Sam Alito leaked the Dobbs decision, the draft of the Dobbs decision early. He said, Alito did it. He was trying to lock in people like Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. So the theory, as I understand it from Joe Scarborough, is that Alito leaked this, which led to an assassination attempt on Brett Kavanaugh. Does that hold water with you, Margot Cleveland?
Not only does it not hold water, that was floated a long time ago, and it's false, because if it was, they would have definitely found who leaked it. There's no way they would, we can't tell who leaked it if it was a conservative. So that's just much more of let's try to throw Alito under the bus, and we'll do anything we can in the way, shape, or form. And at the bottom line, Justice Thomas is right. D.C. is a horrible place.
That's true. And that investigation went the same place the White House cocaine investigation went to, which is nowhere. We didn't get anything. Thank you very much, Margot Cleveland, as always, for your excellent work and for joining us today. It was an entire weekend of insane speeches for Joe Biden. He gave one to the NAACP in Detroit last night, and he said this. This is a doozy. Speaking of the United States Supreme Court, listen to this.
Let me ask you, if he's reelected, who do you think you'll put on a Supreme Court? Do you think you'll put anybody who has a brain?
Well, it can't be worse than, I don't know, this moment. Take a listen.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
I'm not a biologist. Ketanji Brainless Jackson. So Biden says, what's going to happen? Is he going to nominate somebody without a brain? No, that's been tried already. It hasn't worked out that well. It hasn't worked out. My buddy Steve Guest posts the following about this Biden nonsense. He says, a reminder, numerous Biden judicial nominees can't even answer basic questions about the law. Biden nominee Sarah Hill was unable to explain the difference between a stay order and an injunction. Biden nominee Judge Anna DeAlba didn't know what the Dormant Commerce Clause is. Biden nominee Cato Cruz didn't know what a Brady motion is. I believe that involves evidence. I know that one. Biden nominee Jessica Clark didn't know what the appellate standard of review for a question of fact is. I could go on. These folks are being appointed to lifetime judicial jobs. They can't answer simple questions. Would it be too much to ask for Joe Biden to nominate folks with a brain? Yeah, that seems like a reasonable request. How about brains? Just a minimum standard. Have a brain. Unfortunately, we have a president who lacks one right now, so maybe that's why we're seeing all of these nominees come in with the same affliction. But yeah, that is really that's my favorite though. Asking Ketanji Brown Jackson, can you provide a definition of a woman? And she repeats the question to stall for time, and then says, "I'm not a biologist. There's just no way of knowing, ma'am. There's just no way." Hey, coming up, we've got an actual woman joining us. Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears is going to be here in the next hour. She's the Lieutenant Governor of the Great Commonwealth of Virginia, and she wants to respond to Joe Biden's ridiculous speeches, in particular the one he gave to Morehouse College yesterday morning, where he told a black audience that the country hates them that they have to work 10 times as hard to succeed in this hateful country, that this country is trying to slaughter them left and right. Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears is a woman who loves her country, United States Marine. She's got some thoughts on Joe Biden's awful, awful speech. Don't miss that. It's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.